Identity Jedi Show. You guys know what it is. I'm the host, David Lee, and our co-host, Amir's here. And it's just me and him today. We got some things we want to talk about. No guests this week. We're having some guests coming back up. We have, of course, some big heavy hitters coming up in the pipeline. I'll tease this. There may or may not be a crossover podcast in the works with one of your other favorite identity podcasts. I'll let you guys figure out what that is. So only teasers for now. But yeah, we're back at it. Samir, man, we start. How you doing, man?
Good, man. Good. I can hear you loud and clear, so that's a good sign that we don't have any
Yeah.
internet issues here in Austin. And excited to just have just you and me time, right? I mean, when
Yeah.
we have other people on the show, it's sometimes hard to get all our thoughts out. And so now you and I can jump in. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And listen, we got some good topics to get to this week too. Of course, I think we got to start, the biggest news probably over the last couple of weeks, right? So another acquisition yet again in the identity market. Delinea buys FastPath, and so they officially put their name into the platform wars ring. Is now they'll be able to do privileged access management. They'll be able to do full IGA lifecycle, do the acquisition of FastPath, right? I wonder, I don't know how much access management stuff they still have, because remember, Delinea was originally Centrify,
Oh, right.
from back in the day. But I think they've kind of shifted from that, and I think they're just straight PAM. So now they have PAM, IGA, combo in one platform. So we'll see what else they do. But I mean, this is I don't want to say that was the last kind of big name, but I mean, there's really not much left. But I mean, it's everybody in this market now pretty much has multiple offerings, right? So
Yeah. You brought up Centrify, and I remember that from back in the day. Now, do you think the reason they kind of focused 100% on PAM at the time when they changed names and got acquired by, I think, private equity, was because the private equity firm also owned an access management solution? It could be
it
that,
could have
right?
been,
Yeah.
yeah. But from what I remember of Centrify, and this is, listeners, as you guys hear this, right? Yeah, hey, please, send us comments. Let me know if I'm wrong. Centrify was, and I could be getting them confused, but I know they were like heavy, like AD Unix type of like, here's how you
Yeah.
get these accounts from Unix accounts, and you kind of make them look like AD, and it was AD integration. And so I just think naturally they just made a better fit in that privileged access management world, because they were already used to like, how do we kind of understand like these different accounts that are on these Unix boxes and stuff like that. So I think it just kind of made more sense for them to go that way. And so it's interesting. You look at Delinea is a mashup of Thycotic and Centrify, right? So Thycotic was a small, pure PAM player, right?
PAM, exactly.
So those who got bought up, now they become Delinea. Delinea is
And
now
then,
buying FastPath, which
and
FastPath
let me
is,
ask you a question. Didn't
yeah.
Delinea also buy Authamize?
Wait, oh,
Yeah,
hold
they
on.
bought Authamize. I think literally, I think it was like 3 months ago, or just at start of the year. Check it
They
out.
buy
So
Optimized?
they bought Authamize. I'm
No
pretty sure
crap!
it's Authamize.
I totally forgot about that. So listen,
Yeah,
hey, my newsletter subscribers, you guys got to edit an update coming your way. I totally forgot about the optimized purchase. Yeah, okay, so they are. Oh yeah, they're fully in it, man.
yeah. So you think about it, like they the mashup came with Thycotic, and Thycotic was kind of the okay. I'll tell you about as a buyer, right? So when I remember looking at CyberArk and Thycotic as options when I was at Amazon Whole Foods, right? Thycotic was a lot cheaper. They didn't have some of the capabilities we wanted, but we were like, hey,
Yep.
maybe we can work with these guys. And so we thought pretty highly of the team, just to be honest, right? And where they were going, because they were all in on PAM, and we wanted to solve the PAM problem first, right?
Yeah.
And so you have the Centrify, Thycotic come together. I feel like Thycotic kind of became the main focus of Delinea. And then to your point, Delinea got into is now into the platform side, in my opinion, as you mentioned, with identity governance, administration, lifecycle management now with FastPass. And then I don't know if you know this, but Authamize, when they first started the company, I remember back in the day, like 4 or 5 years ago, maybe longer now, they wanted to be in the access role mining. I remember clearly talking to the founders, and all they talked about was like automated role mining and automated attribution of connection, groups to users to
Yeah.
via federation and all that good stuff, right? And then lo and behold, about 2 years ago, they pivoted into ITDR because it was a hot space, right? And so I think I think their strength is ITDR, and I only heard good things again. And, you hear bad things about when people try to do too much, but if somebody's good at something, you'll hear good things, right? So
Yeah.
now you've got Delinea, which is ITDR module or features, IGA lifecycle features, and their strength in PAM, right? So I think they're going back to Nikesh Arora's comment around platformization. I think that seems like what's happening in identity.
Oh yeah, I mean full board. I mean they're going straight forward. I think their issue, right, is going to be developing this platform, right? So you now have FastPath was a combination of FastPath and IDEO. So FastPath was only a year into the IDEO acquisition. IDEO's what gave them their IGA and their lifecycle management capabilities. And so in a year, let's just say
what was FastPath doing before that?
they're very like GRC,
Okay.
GOC, SOD type
SOD
tool,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. I get that. Okay.
So
in identity,
as they
right?
expand,
Focus on identity.
right.
Yes.
But as they expanded, it made sense. Hey, you should do lifecycle. You should, okay, cool. So then they made their purchase. And so now basically if you're Delinea, you have basically 3 different platforms that you've purchased that you now have to integrate into one. And so they've got a big integration problem in front of them, which listen, organizations have done this in the past, they figure it out. And I think that this next year and a half, we enter this cycle of, some of the ones that started earlier start to show the value of, hey, let's see what your platform actually looks like. You've collected all these pieces.
Yeah.
Show me Voltron. Where's he at, right? Like how does it all come together? And I think what I'm expecting to see over the next year is those vendors that were already ahead of the game. So that's the Savians of the world. They were already going down this route long before, right? They're going to have a leg up over this next kind of year and a half, because it's like, hey, all these other vendors are trying to catch up. We're actually already doing it. Here's what it is. So it's going to be interesting to see how vendors respond to that, right? Who's able to show some quick movement on integrating all these different technologies into this platform. So,
yeah, I think, and David, you've seen the genesis of this for many, many years, right? If you think about it, the user who is requesting privileged credentials, right, and wanting that one-time password to go and kind of get those credentials and then use them, and then get locked out after a certain amount of time, and have that log monitored, and then kick off maybe an access review, or maybe not just a deep revision, but like a deep dive into that user's behavior potentially, right? I think the expectation of the identity team is going to be, I want a consistent look and feel workflow. I want to be able to tell my constituents, the admins of different teams, that this is how they have to use it, and not a different experience for the app manager versus the LDAP admin versus the Okta admin versus so I think and you talked about integration, right? I think it's multiple layers of integration. One is Delinea is gonna have to get behind, like, we are now serving multiple kind of use cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second is, I'm not saying this is true, but say there's one of their acquisitions was built on .NET, and one was built on kind of AWS Prometheus and Grafana and this and that, right? And I think sometimes identity people have to learn to think like security people, and security people have to learn to think like identity people, and that influencing will take some time. And you use Savient as an example. I think CyberArk too, right? Like I think they've got PAM, right, or PAM offerings. I think there's bigger players like Microsoft that may not. Sometimes the messaging is confusing for Microsoft, but they've got the resources. They've got the actual platform, which is the operating system on your endpoint, right? They've actually got people using Microsoft Azure. So for them to come with a platform strategy, it's almost like it makes sense. It's like, hey, I got this, right? And I might as well just add on some features. The question I have for you is, from a big identity player like an Okta or a Ping, or people that have been in identity for a long time, or companies, right? Have they bought PAM solutions and ITDR solutions? And maybe that's one of the acquisitions we talk about next.
So, yeah, this is interesting. Okay, I'm trying to figure out who I want to piss off with these next couple of statements.
Sorry, I see that glint in your eye.
Oh, dude, yeah. Because okay, so here's the thing, right? So okay, so to directly answer your question, yes, right. So technically, some of the big identity players have made these purchases. SailPoint purchased Osirum.
Oh,
It's a
right.
PAM play. It's a big one, not really, but it technically gives them a foot in the PAM door, right? Okta bought Spirit, right? So they bought an ITDR company going in there. They didn't necessarily. I would go so far as saying like the workflow engine that they bought a couple of years ago and some other purchases that they made led them to the ability to launch their IGA product, right? It gave them more flexibility in their platform to do the IGA product. What I will say is going to be interesting. You make a good point about Microsoft and they actually are a platform and being there. Is there's two things to me that you look at for being a platform. So there's number one, it's like, here, I have all these features and you can come get into it in one place. But the other part about being a platform is like you gotta have the user base to actually take advantage of all that. And so to me, that positions players like an Okta or a Ping Rock or whatever you want to call them now
All
in
right.
a better position. And here's why I would say that because you own the front door. So this goes back to an argument I had years ago, right? Where owning that front door, that access management, that SSO piece is important because it gets you in there. You get the usage rates and you can understand where somebody's logging in and what they're doing. But it's also like the most visible aspect to get in front of those users. And you know, I'm going to onboard users there because I've got to go and grant you your authentication. And then you look at that and go, I'm going to build around my IDP. I'm going to build around my front door. Nobody's necessarily saying I'm going to build an entire thing around my PAM product. It's a project. I'm going to build around my AG tool. No, it's not, right? Because again, most of your users don't see those tools, and it's a subset of users that hit that, even though it drives and touches everything. That's going to be a very, very big piece that I think a lot of these companies are underestimating is how to talk to that. Now we've been this point solution for so long, and now we've got to sell ourselves as no, we need to be a focal point. You put your investment dollars here and spread it across, and we become the focal point of driving this. And that's none of these companies have done that before. I'll give Okta the credit as they've talked to it more so, but like none of them have really been that focal point of, hey, this is where you drive like your identity and security. And so those things are going to be interesting now. And it's you can't even debate it anymore. Like literally, there's been an acquisition in every single part of the space. It is what it is. Like, okay, everybody's got to arm up and you got to have these features. What's also going to be very interesting is what does that do down market, right? Meaning for some of the newer players that come up. So I look at the Vezas, I look at the Zilas, right? Like, do these founders start looking across and go, hey, do we start teaming up? Do we start figuring this out?
Yeah, it's a great,
Are we going to be able to compete in this new market of like,
mm, mm,
right? Like, how does that affect it? I'm not saying they can't, but
yeah,
you start to have those conversations and go, or do we focus like, hey, that's fine. Like these big boys are fighting up over here. Let's continue to niche down and focus down market to where they're still not touching 5,000 users or less, and we go over here. Like, so it's going to be very interesting to see
yeah.
how it plays out. I know these founders won't. I mean, obviously they won't come out and say these things, but we can tell by like their messaging, their marketing. Like it's going to be very interesting this year.
I think you nailed it. Yeah, you
I'm
nailed it.
sitting
And
back
I'm
just
smiling
waiting.
because I almost think that you and I are going to have a session maybe 3 months from now. And it's going to be like, I told you so, I told you so, I told you so kind of thing, right? I'll tell you why. I think, so I'm going to bash a little bit on Okta. I usually don't do a lot of bashing on this show, but I want to do a little bit here, which is if I was Okta, right? Like, it almost feels like an ITDR acquisition is almost reactionary to the market and not
Mhm.
organic in the mindset that Okta traditionally has been very smart about how they've kind of said, okay, we do the front door, single sign on, MFA, make it really easy, consumable, brilliant strategy, right? Like, who doesn't want an easy way to delight their customers to get access to what they need? Next level, they built out workflows, IG engine, marketed it. They've talked about it in their press releases, etc. Great idea, makes sense. Hey, let's bring the consumer of these identity services and how they interact with it, that same mindset to the IGA professional who's dealing with all this compliance stuff and it's painful and reporting's hard and there's a lot of different data points to collect. And frankly, with Okta works mostly at the group level and the policy level. Most auditors care about that level, not so much about the entitlement and fine-grained objects and permissions, right? Step number 3, in my mind, would have been if I was, and maybe that's why I don't have the big job at Okta, is I would have focused on PAM and said, hey, let's bring just-in-time access the way, and there's a host of startups in this space. You and I met with the CEO of Conductor One, Alex, right? There's Opal, right? There's a number of, promising companies out there. Why not focus on making it really easy and simple to request, revoke, monitor that very single use case? Because as you know, ITDR is a very broad space, right? I mean, what you consider to be the top 5 use cases for ITDR are different from maybe from mine. Secondly, right. You're now trying to influence a set of SecOps people that typically have the largest budget in a security org, or one of the larger budgets versus GRC, for example, and to get them on board with a new vendor, because they're just getting used to the fact that, Splunk alone won't solve all their problems plus a couple of SOAR platforms or a SOAR platform, right? You're getting into that conversation. So now your sales team is going to be like, okay, I got to hit up 3, 4, 5 different people to kind of get my sale. And then what they're going to do is, and I'll tell you, this is classic, after reading Palo Alto's press release and, their numbers and everything, they're going to say, okay, you can have it for free, right? And then, get it in front of your team, and they'll be like, oh, wow, Okta logs are important. I got to pay for these logs. I got to pay for this insight. Even if I don't use the ITDR dashboard that Spira provides Okta, the data is the most important thing, right? Yeah. And that itself, to your point, they're going to take a good, you said it right, 16, 18, 24 months to start seeing value from that acquisition. Versus, I think Savient, on the other hand, started building on a PAM product, I think 1.5 years, 2 years ago. I don't remember exactly. I don't know the maturity level. I haven't seen it, but it just makes sense. Like I do remember Savient talking a little bit about getting into single sign-on and MFA and authentication. I don't know how well that went, but I think the PAM idea is the right idea for them, right? If you ask me.
And so here's the other, so two comments to that, right? Like, yes, Savient started down this path earlier, but and here's the other thing that these other teams are going to have to figure out as they integrate and create these products. You now have to think of these products from a platform level, meaning what? I've got to think of things like delegated administration. What does my admin model look like within this tool? Because before, to your point, I have one audience that I was presenting this to, so I didn't care. But now it's like, wait a minute, same platform. I'm gonna have security people. I'm gonna have managers. I'm gonna have identity people. I'm gonna have response people. Like now, I got to create different role sets. Like this is gonna be spread out throughout the organization, dude. That alone is that's a product in itself, right? So there's a lot of things coming down the pike that these organizations have taken on that they're gonna have to figure out. Yeah. So it's gonna be interesting to see that. But then also kind of like back to Savient. That's what make sure my camera doesn't is, it wouldn't surprise me if any of these vendors are having a conversation around, and they'll never say it out loud, but like, should we look at access management? Should we offer, some type of thing to do around access management? Because again, it's that front door, right? It's building that complete pillar. And listen, I get it. It's commoditized. It's a hard market to want to go in, but it's to that point where you have to at least have the discussion, right? You have internally, is this something we look at? Okay, again, we make it part of our partner strategy. And here's the reason why I think it's interesting that they have to have this discussion, right? And they'll never admit it, but I know they have to have it because before you was like, we'll just partner in that area. But what happens when you go to partners? Like, but the person I will partner with also does things that I do. So now I'm not going to go partner with my competitors. So what do we do?
Well, right? I'll tell you what, and so whoever's listening to this that wants to pay me in Bitcoin, I'm fine taking the money. I'll send you my address later, my token. No, I'm kidding. But I think there's one of 3 approaches, David. And this is just my view, right? And again, there might be more, but these are the 3 approaches. One is you go and partner with a big coal fire guide point and say, listen, I bring this to the table. You have other players that offer authentication. You take us as a bundle, and some of them might be startups. You sell it as such. I will work my butt off to make sure that whether it's APIs or integrations or other ways to kind of push data from these different players, that I can be part of a holistic offering because I'm small and I have to compete with all these big names like Delinea and all that, right? So that's one approach that I think, there's MSSP, right? And at some point, you and I should talk about the MISP, the Managed Identity Security Platform, maybe, right? And how do we do that and do it well? Because and we'll get into the how identity teams are just as understaffed as other security teams, right? And
Yeah.
they sometimes get stuck in the middle of politics and stuff like that. The second thing, I think, the second approach that I'm seeing, and just my research, my view on different websites of different startups and stuff, is trying to bring together the whole identity security and data security, and saying, we will piggyback off of discoverability from native solutions. We look at other products that do DSPM and we'll just add the identity component, or vice versa. We'll have a light data discovery kind of capability. I've seen that come up enough times, but you better raise a lot of money for that, because that's not one, it's a startup, but it's a startup that's well funded. Let's just say that, right?
Yeah.
I think the third one that I've seen, and this is the one that people generally will hang their hat on, and this is just, I've noticed this classic approach from entrepreneurs, is they call it the low-hanging fruit approach. And I'll tell you what it is. It is this. It's PCI 4.0 is out. There are two controls around identity governance, and they have a little bit extra flavor. We are going to just attack that one thing and get in the door, right? And get that 10, 15K deal with enterprise, medium-sized, and small companies. I don't think that's going to work, in terms of, like, let me just put it this way, right? Boards, leaders are aware that compliance doesn't equal security. And if you come in and say, I will check your box and check your box better than what I checked it before, I don't think that's the right approach, but I could be proven wrong, because there might be some crazy legislation that comes out that will require a point solution in this space. And that's why I'm not bullish on privacy solutions either, but that's just me.
Listen, it's all going to be interesting, right? We've seen it before as an overall industry, right? We saw this shift away from big, huge platforms to best of breed, and we didn't know how it was going to work then, and were customers going to spend X amount of dollars on all these individual things, and they did, and they were fine with that. So as we come around this next generation of these platforms, like, we're going to see like what customers' appetites are. I think, but I agree with you. I think we've got a smarter customer now. Right. Yeah. As in, they've been around the block, and it's like, okay, you're not going to just fool me with, like fancy. Like I need to see some more than just you coming in and saying you're going to help solve my compliance. That doesn't mean anything, right? Like, so interesting. Yeah.
And so I want to ask you, like, where's the identity profession going? I mean, we have our own set of startups that some people don't understand. We've got our own ecosystem. We've got our own conferences, not just Gartner, but Identiverse. I think you spoke there, or you're speaking there. I remember seeing something.
Yeah, spoke there last year, speaking again this year.
Awesome. Yeah. And so what's going on with our profession? Are we security people? Are we kind of like, because I meet identity people that don't report to security, they report to infrastructure. I met a guy that worked for one of the largest kidney dialysis companies, and he's like, I report to the COO. Right? Not even security. So what's your take on this? Like, how are we evolving, individually?
Yeah. So yes, we are security people. That's what we are. Now, granted, have we operated and acted as such? No, we haven't. And so to answer your question, where are we evolving? I think we are evolving into a more recognizable subset of security, right? And so with that, I mean, and here's what I point to. So we just in the last 3-4 years, listeners, you can go research this and correct me later. I think CID Pro, it's the first like professional exam for identity professionals, maybe launched about 3 years ago, right? So we have organizations now that set up around identity, trying to set standards for, here's a base level of knowledge, here's your certification path, things of that nature, right? So that's kind of in its infancy of growing. You see where the products are going and how things are talking about it. We are seeing a shift of moving these organizations to security. CISOs are now owning identity more. If not directly, they're coming under the organization. And so with that, right, I think is going to come this next level of discomfort of moving identity from IT-based functions and tasks to where they are evaluated on how many tickets did you close, or you doing this or whatever, to, hey, how are you securing the business? What part of what you're doing is applying the proper policy and things of that nature? And that's where, in my opinion, we should be, but that's not exactly how we've operated. So that's going to be a little painful transition for a lot of identity people to kind of come and learn that. And I don't say that, and I think most of the identity people would enjoy it. I mean, having gone to both been in both types of conferences, security and identity. I'm like, the people that do it, they like the same things. They're both the same personality types. I'm like, so it's just learning more about one side of it. So I think the entire industry, and I've said this for a while, is evolving, and that's even down to the practitioner, like the day and day professionals. It's evolving what they do, like the type of questions that they're asking as they see like how far their 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 purview really goes, right? And so I would like to see us get a little bit more buttoned up. I would like to see us treat things a little bit more, like security. But I think it's gonna take some time to shift that.
Yeah, yeah. I had dinner with a couple of CISOs, one a former CISO and one existing CISO, and I asked them about identity, and they were like, they were not sure if they should own it, right? They were like, it's operational. I want to be strategic. I want to talk to the board about certain things, and there's a lot of operational aspects of identity, right? There's operational aspects of remediation that they didn't want to own, right? They don't want to be on the hook for doing the work. They want to find it, prioritize it, and get it done through much larger IT, tech ops, tech teams, etc. So it's going to be interesting. I almost think it needs to be one of those, and I hate to say it, like hybrid, not hybrid, no, where you have dotted lines, like you have the, kind of dotted line relationships, because I think the CISOs already have enough dotted line stuff to deal with. But I think having another leader that can own relationships around, help desk and onboarding of identities appropriately and drive end-to-end identity governance, right? And risk, and to some extent security of identities, of course, without the CISO again saying, well, I've got 10 things on my plate and identity doesn't seem to be that broken. So let me just leave it as is and just work with the 5 solutions that somebody bought over the last 10 years, right? Yeah. That's what I fear about for identity, is that it's not going to be the sexy thing that people talk about, like a attack vector. It ends up being an identity problem. I agree, but it doesn't start off with identity. It always starts off somewhere else.
Yeah. And so, listen, I think that's a perfect segue into talking about so the other conversation that's come around lately is this whole role of chief identity officer, right? And I've always been for it, right? So I'll be a little petty and call this out, but what sparked this last discussion was there was a LinkedIn post. Forbes did an article talking about chief identity officer, and then Andrew, I'm gonna butcher your last name, buddy. I'm so sorry. Andrew Hardenzings, I think, had posted about it and said, hell, just drawing some good comments on it on LinkedIn. And so he had posted that, I don't know if it was last year or 2 years ago, that Ian Glazer was part of a panel that talked about chief identity officer at Identiverse. And he made the comment like, oh no, Ian's been talking about this forever. I was like, well, technically, I talked about this in 2017. That I was like, I think this is something like we need to have. So that's just me being petty. But the purpose of it is that we need somebody to own identity at an executive level within the organization. And while I'm all for it because I love identity and I would love to see this role, I question whether or not we are ready for this role, right? I look at, the CISO role has been around, maybe 20 years now? Yeah, maybe a little bit longer, right?
Yeah.
And do we have a complete understanding of how this person operates within the C-suite and at the executive board? Are we seeing across the board get enough results for hey, yes, the CISO has been good and it applies these things? Because we hear a lot about the bad stuff of it, like the quick turnover and the first ones to get blamed and all this stuff, whatever. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we've set the CISO up to win, right, in that role. So therefore, if that's the case, and we have much more data to prove the business value of security than we do identity. We're still struggling to show the business value of identity. So if the CISO is struggling with that, just starting a new C position and going, okay, you're chief identity officer. If we haven't figured out those things yet, that person's really going to struggle in that position. And so while I'm glad we're having the conversation, it begs the question, are we ready to handle that and know what that means and give that position the authority and the reach that it needs to be able to get the job done? So as somebody who is set in the seat and knows CISOs much better than I do, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that if the CISO, and I've seen CSO, I've seen Chief Trust Officer, right? I think when those levels come into play, they will have the leverage to create C levels below them potentially, right? And I think that's where, I've seen titles like Chief Security Operations Officer. I've seen some interesting titles under the, an elevated CSO, CTO's Chief Trust Officer. Okay. I think there's definitely a possibility. I think the way it's going to probably transpire in my eyes is where someone comes in as a new CISO and has to build that credibility, takes a couple of years at least, doesn't have the headcount to go and get a true identity leader, and ends up hiring a couple of, identity architect level, maybe even a senior manager level, maybe even a director level, right? But not somebody who sees it end to end, understands the business use cases, and not their fault. They just maybe don't even have the headcount or the mandate. They'll end up going down the path of what I'm seeing a big trend right now is a VCISO. There'll be a virtual chief identity officer, and they'll start there. They'll get the trust. They'll get the buy-in. That consultant or set of consultants will build trust, whether it's from a big four or otherwise. And then eventually that CSO, chief trust officer, will say, listen, we can continue paying this company $1 million a year, or we can pay them $500,000 and get a chief identity officer. And that's going to bring us so much more business value because they'll be embedded with the team, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's the right approach. And I do think that there's enough of a mandate around identity, just like there's around security operations and things like that, to actually make that case. Now, it's going to be similar to, like you said, 20 years ago when the CISO role first came about. It started in financial services. The first CISO, I think, was Citibank, expanded to the other banks, and then healthcare said, oh, shoot, we also regulated, we should do it. And then from healthcare, it transpired into, and it took a long time for the tech companies in the Bay Area to have CISO titles. I think some of them still don't, right? Or they'll amalgamize, I guess that's the word. They'll say it's, okay, this is Chief Security and Operations Officer, or Chief Security and Technology Officer, or as I've seen best is Chief Trust Officer and VP of Infrastructure. Like, let me make it meaty enough so it can report to the actual CTO, right? Otherwise, the CISO team is smaller, typically compared to, a large development org or et cetera, et cetera. So that's where I see it going.
Interesting. Yeah. Listen, I like your aspect of like the virtual chief identity officer. I think that is a good way to start it, and I see that a lot as I talk to customers. They just having somebody to help them guide through and figure out all that together. So interesting times indeed. Let's see. Listen, I can't say I would be first in line to jump up for that position, chief identity officer, but I'll wait for the second round. I'm like, all right, let me see how they do. And then
you don't want to put in your LinkedIn profile the world's first chief identity. I think there's somebody who already has that actually.
I'm good, man.
You're good.
I'm good. I already know everything that's going to come with that territory. Yeah. I'm like, nah, I'm straight. I don't need to be the first one there. Man, but yeah. So let's to kind of wrap up the conversation. We've kind of touched about it a little bit. Let's just kind of the state of identity as we look at everything right now, going into 2024 and what we see, and then we'll talk a little bit about Identiverse. I'll do some plugs at the end. Those of you listening, Identiverse 2024. I will be speaking again, so I've got discount codes, so you can check the description and the link for this. Whether or not you're listening, you're watching on YouTube, it'll be there. And then I'll probably pop it up on the screen here in a second. So make sure to go register, save you 25% off of that. But when we look at the state of identity and where we are so far, right? So let's just call it Q1's pretty much over, right? We're in March, right? We got another whatever, right? So Q1 down, right? What we've seen so far. What's your take on where you think the identity market is right now?
I think we talked about earlier is consolidation. I think an interesting point you brought up that made me think while we were talking, the whole Delinea play, the private equity play of bringing together a PAM, an SOD compliance focused player. I think the same private equity player bought SailPoint as well, right? SailPoint, Ping, or was it Ping?
So yeah, SailPoint. So Thoma Bravo has SailPoint and Ping.
Okay.
I don't really know who has Delinea. Thoma Bravo had a majority interest stake in Delinea, but then they sold off the majority stake a couple of years ago. So I technically don't know where Delinea falls. But.
Got it. Okay, so I think it happened at a large scale, right? You took a public company private, you brought in some, fast growing, kind of large and mid to large enterprises. You did somewhat of a mashup to some extent. I think just hearing you talk, man, I think that it's going to happen with the startups in the earlier stage. Someone's going to come in and say, let me take these guys who are strong in identity data governance, the combination there. Let me take another ITDR. Let me grab a unique PAM offering for machine identities. I'm using I'm using examples here, right? I don't know for sure, but I feel like someone's going to bring these two together and say, listen, you now are an actual full-fledged offering. I don't want to use the word platform, but a full-fledged set of solution offerings, and we can now compete. But you alone were not competing, and it's probably going to take some big VCs who have, are not seeing at a board level the kind of numbers they wanted or expected, and are going to push for this to happen. But I think that's going to happen this year, man. I think that's going to happen in identity. That's my prediction.
Okay. Interesting.
I think the other one is, to your point, is, I think Nikesh Arora, if you read that blog post or LinkedIn post about platformization, I think the way that these startups, including, across the identity spectrum, the security spectrum, are going to keep giving deep discounts to get in the door. Because budgets are just recovering. Somebody's going to have to go and argue and say, well, I can just use Microsoft Entra for 50 cents a user more, or $1 a user more, right? It gives me 60% of what I need. And these startups are going to come in and say, well, talk to the last guy who did that and see how it turned out. And we'll match the price because, I can't go and ask for more money, that kind of thing, right? And it's hard for a CISO or even their identity leader to go in and say, I'm going to replace SailPoint. You better have something really big behind you, some big initiatives, some big, transformational projects that say, well, SailPoint doesn't work well with blah, 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 right? And that just hasn't happened yet, right? SailPoint has managed to somehow just do just enough to keep the customer from yelling, screaming, and going, yelling at blood on the streets, right? You know better than I do. You worked at SailPoint, so we won't even go there. But the truth is, it's going to be deep discounts, man. It's a buyer's market.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, right? They have the leverage and the power, and when you start to anytime you start to get that value bulk sell kind of pricing, right? Which is like, well, I can get all of this for cheap over here. Why do I? Why should I pay? You're asking me to pay a premium price for you, and you're only giving me one thing out of five, right?
Right.
But so I want to go back to that idea of somebody pulling us all together with the smaller players. And I know PE firms don't think this way. And so listen, this goes out, right? We're getting a good following. If you were a PE person and you're listening to this, please hit us up, identityjedi@gmail.com. We'll bring you on. I'd love to have this discussion with you because the way I see it is, I would absolutely do something this way. And here's why. Number one, I'm like, if I start smaller with these organizations, like you're not that far set in your architecture designs. Like we could truly build a for purpose platform built solution that's going to move a lot faster as far as time to value and things that I can do, right? I've got so much more room to pivot and change and grow that if I go put these all together, right? So then if I say, oh, they got discovery, no problem. Like I can, whatever features we don't have, I'm buying small enough where we can get those things out in months, right? Whereas you're still going to wait 12 or 14 months to get this. These teams got to figure out how to integrate this together and then deliver you a new feature. We've already got an integrated solution here, and we'll deliver new features. And so that to take the opportunity to piece together your own power player for nickels, like nickels right now, right on the dollar, and then put that out to the market and put an engine behind and go, I'm going to create the next big platform to go compete with these big boys over the next 3 years. Because I'm going to solve a lot of things before they get there. And I know PE firms don't think this way, right? Because they look at it as they got to see the cash, they got to see the value. But I'm just like, I'm sorry. I'm just looking at it like if that's a value play, I'm like, I can let these gorillas go fight it out. And while they're doing all this and they're trying to struggle to get those platforms, I just build a nice little platform monster of my own. I go hit that small market level. I go grab a couple of forward-looking enterprises, and before you know it, it's like, well, shoot, we're getting the same value here. So it would be interesting. I'd love to see that. I mean, just for the drama of it alone, I'd be so happy to see that happen. But I don't know. I don't think PE firms think that way. So hey, all you PE people out there, hit us up. Let us know. Happy to have that conversation.
Yeah.
But I think overall, I think I agree with you of where the state of identity is. I think we're finally in year one of that evolution. And so here's what I mean by that we realize that things are changing and that this isn't a fad. We're going to have to switch how we handle things. And so now I think we're in that first year of doing like, what is this new what does this new age look like, right? What we're going to start seeing. Okay, what does a platform feature like really look like? I'm expecting, the Oktas, the SailPoints, the CyberArks of the world by mid to late this year to start showcasing either some case
Yeah.
studies or really showcasing the power of their platform and all these things you can
Yeah.
do. It should start being reality this year. So I expect this year we start to see it, and now let's see how it plays with the customers, right? Now let's see.
I'm so excited. I'm excited. Frankly, I hope they all do well. Of course, always wish well on everyone. I think it's going to be interesting. You made a great point, right? They're going to have to evolve their own RBAC model, right? I log in, I get to Okta admin console. I log in, I get to Okta threat detection console. I log in, I get into Okta PAM console. And then within the users, right, it's just going to be, and so that's going to take a little bit of time, I think, but that's the holy grail, right? I mean, it's simple. The Okta interface is simple, but how do you make it such that it really hits home with the user base, right? The customer.
So we'll put this out here. Like, I like this hypothesis. Because I could see two things happening, right? So let's do this. Let's say we hypothesize that these companies start to show what that looks like. They show the value to the customers. Oh, you jump from IGA. We'll stay with the Okta theme. You jump from IGA to our threat detection to this, and this is how it all comes together. And these nice PE firms look back and go, "Oh man, the market's eating this up. Oh, the market's loving this. Oh, their customers are being drawn to this, and we're seeing increases in customer flow from this. Oh, okay, cool." Then you wait and go, okay, but it's probably 6 to 9 months before you start to see, well, customers, they loved it, but in actual implementation, they're still not getting what they were promised, right? They're struggling. Right. We're seeing them struggle to integrate this. And so that's where I see like a smart, advantageous PE going, hey, if this is picking up customer growth, hey, no problem. Let's go do it now, because by the time these customers start struggling, we picked up 2-3 small startups. We can spin this through. Like we'll have their entire platform available to them by the time these customers go live. It's a huge opportunity to disrupt some things and cause some change, which I'm all for. Like, listen, if I was a PE and I had the back in the cash, I'd be doing it. I'd be looking at every single one of these guys and going, all right, what are you doing? Who am I putting together? Let's bring in some go-to-market. Let's figure this out. Let's put an engine behind this, because I think if your identity is ripe now to say, if I'm designing it today, what does a modern IGA PAM access management solution look like? Okay, well, access management's commoditized. That's easy. There's nothing really to build there. PAM, I kind of get it. Okay, right. Then IGA, this is really just, I need a nice integration point. I need a workflow engine. I need to be able to create some rules and policies, and there we go. Like I can toss that back out today. So yeah, there you go, people. I just made it super easy for you. Let's see if anybody actually does it.
I like that. Awesome.
Man, so listen, always great catching up, Samir. So as we wrap up, so for those of you watching, the discount code for Identiverse is streaming below. It will be in the description. But Identiverse is happening in Las Vegas, May 28th through the 31st. They have early bird registration right now. I will be giving a master class. So it's a big 50-minute session. We're going to be breaking down, it's the next level of how to be an identity Jedi, right? So this is the master class, basically how to ask questions, how to deliver business value, like really these things from a practitioner that you need to understand of communicating identity to the business. So I'll be there all week. So Samir will be there as well. We'll be hanging out. Again, we've got some things in the works for Identiverse, some plans there that we'll keep you guys up to date on. But other than that, that's it. Identity Jedi newsletters at theidentityjedi.com. Subscribe. That comes out every 2 weeks. Samir, as always, man, it's a pleasure, man. We got to start planning our next live one too.
Let's do it. Maybe Atlanta. Let's do it. Oh, okay, got it.
I mean, we'll figure it out, right? But we got to do another live one. The people are asking for it. We got to give them what they want.
Let's do it.
All right, man. All right, people. Till then, be good to each other, be kind to each other, love each other. See you guys.
Take care. Bye.